Welcome to the Get Real Podcast, your high-octane boost of full-on reality therapy for personal, business, and investing success with your host, Ron Phillips, because somebody's got to tell it like it is.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Get Real Podcast. Ron Phillips here with maybe a funny story. Should be fun. Let's get into it. My wife and I enjoy we like true crime stuff. Quite a bit of true crime stuff. And so occasionally we'll get caught up in a true crime case that's out there. This happened to us, a couple of months ago. Well, several months actually, with this Karen Reed trial. I don't know if you heard about this Karen Reed trial, but this lady was on trial for supposedly killing her boyfriend, who was a cop. And there was this whole big thing about the cops being involved. And there were so many podcasters and YouTubers, content creators who were out there covering this in great detail. And we stumbled on one called The Lawyer You Know. I don't even know this dude's name, because he's just the lawyer you know. You would think if you knew him, you would know his name, but I actually don't know the guy's name. I just know him as the lawyer you know. It was really, this guy's, actually, he's pretty decent at, covering the case, but literally half the comments, a couple of things I learned. Number one, I learned that if you go on YouTube live and it's something people want to actually consume en masse, like something like this, where it's this trial and there's just this mass movement of people who are watching it, people will pay you to show their comment. This is the most insane thing I think I've ever seen in my life. The more insane thing is they'll pay to post literally the dumbest comments on the planet. So apparently this guy's pretty decent looking, because I think 90% of the people who watch his podcast are women, and they would make comments about his hair and and they would pay really good money for a comment to get posted on this show. I did learn quite a bit about the case. My wife and I enjoyed it. We would listen to this dude's podcast or YouTube, like in the evening, just kind of catch up on the case, because, some of us have to work. Some people just sit around all day thinking up pithy comments that they can pay the dude to post on his video, which is just hysterical to me. But anyway, one day I'm sitting there and my family is there. We're all nobody's paying much attention, but it's sitting there and it's playing. And I make this very ironic comment about the dude sitting there talking about his own merch while he's sitting there wearing his own shirt. And I'm like, the dude wears his own merch. This is crazy, because it said, the lawyer you know on his shirt. The ironic piece of this is that I was sitting on the couch in my Lineage shirt. And my daughter made so much fun of me because I was sitting in my merch. Now, I don't sell mine online, but still, it was really pretty funny. So for my birthday, she bought me and the whole rest of the family. I'm going to show you guys. Anybody who's watching, you can see this. And I'm going to describe it to those of you who are listening. Okay. Here is the shirt she bought me. It says, "The Ron You Know." So here I am today on my podcast. That was a long way of telling you guys that I'm wearing my own merch that my daughter made for me. The Ron You Know. Let me know if there's a market for this. I'll put together a merch page. And if you guys want to, I'll start doing lives on YouTube, and you guys can pay me to make comments about how bald I am, etc. It'll be a lot of fun, I think. Anyway, on to the news. Not new news like we already established. We don't do that on this show. This is just news. It's interesting real estate news, though. The headline caught my eye because it was a few years ago that there were headlines that were not the same, but similar headlines. The headline is, and this is from Bloomberg, the headline is, "Foreigners are buying U.S. homes again while Americans get sidelined." And I thought, well, that's interesting. I mean, we hear that the market is, turning horrible. And listen, it is shifting. I mean, if you're paying attention to if you're paying attention at all, you realize that the real estate market's been shifting for a couple of years. This was particularly interesting. So I started to read through this. I want to share a few pieces of this. It starts out with a story about Luka Malkovich. In 2018, this guy bought 2 duplexes in Milwaukee for about $100,000 a piece. Now, $100,000 duplex is not, even in Milwaukee, not a great property, but I bet it cash flows like crazy, right? It says the rental properties became a steady source of passive income. That's not true. It's not passive, but income nonetheless, helping him to buy an additional 6 properties in Wisconsin. Now, there's several things inside of here that I don't want to just gloss over, okay? And I hate to pause in the middle of this story, but this is important, okay? Because a lot of Americans don't get this. At Lineage, we spend our time literally talking to people, doing portfolio reviews so that people can understand what this guy, I guess, just automatically knew. Now, I'm going to read this again. It says the rental properties became a steady source of passive income, helping him to buy an additional 6 properties in Wisconsin. Now the 30-year-old conducts most of his business from afar, splitting his time between the U.S., Serbia, and his home country of Montenegro. From a real estate standpoint, he says there's no better bet than America. It doesn't matter the administration, doesn't matter the president, it's always the U.S. The perfect time to invest here is always 5 years ago. Now, here we have a person who, I don't know how, it doesn't say how long he's been in the country, but he's too young to have been a very seasoned real estate investor because he's too young to have gone through the 2008 housing crisis, it says in here, okay? It's important to note, though, that he has learned more in his short stint in America than most Americans do about investment real estate and about the market in general. There are some things that he says in here that to foreigners, I think, seem inherently true. And yet in America, because we live here and we take this land for granted, we take our freedoms for granted, we take the real estate market for granted, we just take stuff for granted here, right? Like our poor people are some of the wealthiest people in the world. Stuff like that. We just inherently take this stuff for granted. Here we have a guy who came to this country. He's not a citizen. He's a foreigner. He lives mostly out of the country, but he owns, at the time of this article, he owns 7 investment properties in America, and he cash flows pretty well enough that those properties are doing what I've said on this show multiple times. They're birthing other investment properties. This guy is doing exactly what I've been telling you guys to do forever. He's a foreigner and he gets it. And another couple of things that he says, I just want to remind you. I think people get hung up. I did a show back during the election sometime talking about how people are just on the sidelines waiting to figure out what is going to happen with the election. As if somehow magically the election is going to make it so that people don't need a place to live and real estate is a bad investment. Very, very interesting. Anyway, this guy gets it. He said, this is a quote, "It doesn't matter the administration. It doesn't matter the president. It's always the U.S. Quote, "The perfect time to invest here is always 5 years ago." This guy gets it. Long term, nothing better, no asset class that's better. And and he gets it. And he is increasing his portfolio at a rate that most people in the United States don't do. It's very, very interesting. Okay, now, you would think from the headline of this article that the foreign investors are just taking over the market, right? Because the foreign purchases of American real estate are up 33% from the same period the year ending before. But it is important to note that they only account for 2.5% of the sales. Okay, so again, just the headline caught my attention. That's what it was intended to do. Read the entire article. And as you're reading it, read with an open mind and start to understand, ask questions when you're reading these news articles. Is a 33% increase a big increase? Sure, it is a big increase. Is it a net impact to the overall market? Well, not when you're only 2.5% of the market and you increase 33%. It's not that big of a deal. If you isolate it, it's an interesting talking point, and it's an interesting something to look at. And as they interview these people, every one of these people that they interviewed, all of them basically had the same sentiment. Now, it's interesting to note that the last time that the foreign investors were heavily investing in the market was back during 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18. Then it started to kind of taper off a little bit. Now it's starting to tick back up, but it's nowhere near those levels. But it's just super interesting to note that the foreigners' attitude about investing in U.S. real estate is remarkably different, I think, than most Americans. And I think that's the largest takeaway from this. The other important takeaway here, I think, is while domestic buyers have been held back and slowed down, the same factors haven't held back foreign buyers. And they've been able to swoop in on the opportunities that are available. About 44% of the U.S. properties sold to non-citizens over the past year went to buyers who live outside the country. So, a little bit less than half are folks who don't even live here. They're just buying from foreign countries. Most of them coming from Israel, Canada, and I'll find the other country in just a minute. But the things that are subduing us here in the States, elevated mortgage rates and home prices, are not having an impact on foreign buyers. Now, that's interesting as well, because in most other countries, owning real estate is incredibly expensive for the people who live in that country, out of reach. U.S. prices are not that crazy expensive in comparison, and that's why they buy over here, not to mention the freedom, owning real estate, and a whole host of other things, right? But most people outside buy in cash. So the interest rates have much less of a bearing on whether or not they actually invest. Okay. It does make it easier for them when the folks in America are not heavily buying, like in 2012 when they started buying heavily. The people in America weren't buying heavily, and you could get really, really good deals. That's starting to happen again right now. The real estate market doesn't have to fall apart for there to be good deals. There are builders that are paying incentives, dropping prices, paying incentives, and it amounts to an enormous amount of money off of the property when you actually consider how much they're paying to reduce interest rates, et cetera. And so these guys are swooping in, and they're starting to take these deals, starting to understand that there are deals to be had on the market right now, which is fantastic. There was one other thing I wanted to tell you that was in here. It was the other market or the other country that is heavily investing in the United States. And for whatever reason, I can't find it right now. And that's really frustrating. Anyway, Israel. Oh, here it is. Mexico, Canada, and Israel. They're the ones who are driving the majority of the interest. But as it states in this article, people from all over the world are investing in the United States, heavily from those three. And so I guess Point of all of this is, let's try to at least understand what the people who are not citizens of the United States inherently understand because of their perspective from being outside of our country and not having been spoiled by living in the United States. And that is that the United States is, this is the best real estate market, in spite of the fact that occasionally, like 7 times in the last 75 years, the real estate market has had a down year. And I think 4 or 5 of those were during the last downturn. It's a pretty safe investment as well, even if you buy at the top of the market, because you have cash flow and you have somebody paying your principal down and you have tax incentives. The returns, even with an adjustment in price, still beat every other investment that you can find over time. It just does. And in addition to that, this just continues to birth more and more and more, like it did for Mr. Malkovich. And so I'm going to leave you with that. The foreign investors get it, and they get it in a way that a lot of people don't. I hope you do, because you're informed. You listen to the show. This is the Ron signing out. And until next week, get out there and make something happen.
This has been the Get Real Podcast. To subscribe and for more information, including a list of all episodes, go to getrealestatesuccess.com.